I want to get this right, so I want to look at my notes for this. According to this, you are black. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That is correct. Okay.
Not African American. That's not a term I like.
How come you don't like the term African
Ridiculous. I was born and raised in America. I've never been to Africa. Why am I an African American? Most of my people have been here longer than most of the other people in this room. Yet most people don't have a hyphen. You know, I'm an Italian American, Greek American, Romanian American. It's an absurd term. It's a term that Jesse Jackson almost single-handedly crammed down the throats of our media. And after Jackson began to talk about why blacks should have some connection to Africa, all of the media began using that expression. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't use the term African American that much, because one time I had a guest on the show and I referred to her as African American. She said, well, I'm actually Jamaican. Guys that use these phrases, what are they going for there?
Well,
what is the goal there?
The goal is to tell black people that we're victims, that discrimination and racism remain major problems in America when in fact they don't. And they want black people to vote for the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party gets 95% of the black vote, and the reason they get it is because blacks are convinced that the #1 issue facing the country right now is social justice, racist white cops, discrimination, systemic racism, microaggression, whatever new word they come up with, and it's a bunch of nonsense. The #1 problem domestically facing this country is a breakdown of the family. And President Obama said it. I didn't. A black kid, or kid, not just a black kid, a kid raised without a dad is 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crimes, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. So you're far more likely to end up in jail without having a dad than you are because of a white racist cop.
Right. So, but you wouldn't not acknowledge that there are some systemic issues.
Give me an example. Tell me what you think the most systemic racist issue is. What is it?
Well, I would say that because black people in most cases, in many cases, were descendants of slaves, that racism as an institution, that it just, a certain amount of it just exists.
2015? Give me the most blatant racist example you can come up with right now.
I think you could probably find evidence that, in general, cops are more willing to shoot if the perpetrator is black than white.
What's your basis for saying that? Last year...
Well, look, I know a lot of people would say, look what's going on in Chicago.
I know what they would say. Yeah. I'm talking about what the facts are. 965 people were shot by cops last year and killed. 4% of them were white cops shooting unarmed blacks. In Chicago in 2011, 21 people were shot and killed by cops. In 2015, there were 7. In Chicago, which is a third black, a third white, and a third Hispanic, 70% of the homicides are black on black. About 40 per month, almost 500 per year last year in Chicago, and 75% of them are unsolved. Where is the Black Lives Matter on that? The idea that a racist white cop shooting unarmed black people is a peril to black people is BS. It's complete and total BS. And the reason for these so-called activists saying this is the assumption that racism remains a major problem in America. The media, CNN, especially MSNBC, runs down whenever a black cop shoots somebody, and it's some march on Washington. It's ridiculous. Black people, half the homicides in this country are committed by and against black people. Last year there were 14,000 homicides. I'm not talking about suicides. I'm talking about homicides. Half of them were black. 96% of them black on black of that 7,000. Where's the Black Lives Matter people on that?
So there's where you would say that this is purely because of social justice. This is purely because they want ultimately for people to be angry enough to just keep voting Democrat.
That's right. And where's the evidence of the lack of social justice? When a black suspect is killed by a cop, believe me, the media is on it. People are watching it, and justice will, for the most part, occur. In Baltimore, where Freddie Gray was killed, Freddie Gray died in a van. I shouldn't say was killed. Died in a van. Yeah. You have a city that's 45% black. City council is 100% Democrat. The majority of city council is black. The top cop at the time was black. The #2 cop was black. The majority of the command staff is black. The mayor is black. The AG is black. And yet here we are talking about racism. I mean, it's absurd. Yeah. It's absurd. It's a study, University of Washington. And it turns out cops were more reluctant, more hesitant to pull the trigger against a black suspect than a white suspect. Probably because of the fear of being accused of racially profiling and the fear that the civil rights establishment was going to come down on him. So if anything, whites are more likely to be shot by a cop under certain circumstances than a black person. And in the last 30 or 40 years, the percentage of suspects killed by cops who are black has declined 75%. However, the percentage of whites killed by cops has flatlined.
Yeah.
And so, if anything, people are more concerned about shooting black people for fear that they're going to be called racist. Almost every one of these incidents involves somebody resisting arrest. Why don't you just do what the police tell you? My dad said, when I get pulled over, have my hand at 10 o'clock, have my hand at 2 o'clock, say yes, sir, say no, sir, make sure my paperwork is in order, and if I feel the cop is mistreating me, get a badge number and deal with it later on. If Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and Obama and the whole group of them told black people to do that, we'd have a lot fewer of these things to deal with in the first place.
Yeah. All right, so I'm with you. I'm hearing a lot of what you're saying here. So as a black conservative then, who now you've laid out your case there.
But you haven't laid out yours. I asked you to name the most important example of racism, and you gave white cops going after black people. And I told you, gave you the facts for that, so that's nonsense. So you must have something else. What else is it? If you think racism remains a problem in America, give it to me.
Well, I think it remains a problem.
Give it to me.
It may not be systemic in that it's not like you're not being hired because you're black. There's no systemic reason, legal reason that exists, that kind of thing. But I think that racism as a general theory exists.
I need some specifics. You gave me the white cop thing. What else? Give me another example where you think is a problem.
Well, as a black conservative, tell me how do you get people to come around?
You're the one who made the assertion that you think racism remains a major problem in America. I asked you to give me an example. You gave me white cops going after blacks. As far as I'm concerned, you didn't hold it up very well. What's the other argument you have? The problem, the biggest burden that black people have, in my opinion, again, is the percentage of blacks, 75% of them, that are raised without fathers. And that has every other social negative consequence connected to it. Crime, not being able to compete economically in the country, being more likely to be arrested. That's the #1 problem facing the black community. And when I hear people tell me about systemic racism or unconscious racism, I always say, give me an example, and almost nobody can do it.
So the family stuff. So I'll follow your logic there on the family stuff. What can actually be done about that then? I mean, because that's a big
reverse the welfare state. In 1890, 1900, you look at census reports, a black kid, believe it or not, was slightly more likely to be born to a nuclear intact family than a white kid. Even during slavery, a black kid was more likely to be born under a roof with his biological mother and biological father than today. What's happened is we launched this so-called war on poverty in the 60s, where literally Lyndon Johnson sent people knocking on doors. I lived in the 60s, and people knocked on doors apprising women of their availability to welfare, provided there was no man in the house. And we went from 25% of blacks being born outside of wedlock in 65 to 75% right now. And you look at how much money that we spent on welfare, and the lines are parallel. It was a neutron bomb dropped on this country, not just on the black community, but on people in general. At one time, only about 5% of whites were born outside of wedlock. Now 25% of whites are born outside of wedlock. I've never heard a reporter ask Obama about the connection between the rise of the single-parent household and the rise of welfare spending. I've never heard anybody ask him that question, not one time.
Yeah.
And so, as far as I'm concerned, there's this desire not to have this conversation for fear that it then will cause you to rethink your assumptions. A psychologist would call that cognitive dissonance. This anxiety that you feel when you have had your assumptions challenged and you don't want to do it. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah. So how then would someone like you, or someone that believes in the things that you're talking about, how do you wrestle away a little bit of the narrative from the Black Lives Matter folks? Because obviously
I tell the truth.
You care about the same thing.
Of course,
right?
I do. I tell the truth. I talk about the #1 cause of preventable death for young white men is car accidents. The #1 cause of preventable death for young black men is homicide committed by other young black men. I tell the truth. I give the facts, and the facts are racist. But the Democratic Party has successfully convinced blacks that racism, this white cop, this is widespread, the man's out to get you, and vote for us and we'll deal with it. To me, there is a access of indoctrination. You have the media, you have academia, and you have Hollywood, all of which tell black people that they're victims. Most professors are to the left. The media certainly is all to the left, and Hollywood's to the left. And so you get up and you're indoctrinated all the time with things like social justice, inequality, the man's out to get you, we need a higher minimum wage. They're taught that in Mexico, they're taught that other places, and they come here in America and they pull that lever for the Democratic Party, which is why, in my opinion, the left wants borders to be porous, because it changes the country. Right. Changes the electorate.
It changes the demographics and all that.
The Democratic Party has not won the white vote since 1964. The more white people there are in the country, the worse Democrats do. The more left-wing, the more people of color there are in the country, the best the left does. And so what incentive is there for them to police the borders? What incentive is there for them to shut down sanctuary cities, to stop catch and release? There isn't. In my opinion, there's been a very subtle and very diabolical changing of the mentality of this country by left-wing people, so that a state like California could never vote for Ronald Reagan as they did in the past, could never vote for Richard Nixon as they did in the past. You have New York and California, just write them off. And there's 10 or 12 states now that we fight over. Everything else is now written off. It's ridiculous.